I'm Leslie Berland, SVP of Digital Partnerships and Development at American Express.
And Stephen Rosenblatt, Chief Revenue Officer over at Foursquare.
So I'll let either of you take away.
Sure.
Talk about the partnership and then how that's been.
So our partnership with Foursquare actually launched about 2.5–3 years ago, I think. It feels like a million years ago. But what was really interesting for us is that was truly a defining moment for our company, and I'll explain why. But we were and are a 60,000 employee sized company. Foursquare at the time was 40 people. There was one business development person at the time. And what we did together was really innovative at the time, which is, we looked across our core assets and our core technology. We obviously have a closed loop. We are able to see card member data, transaction data. We have a merchant database. So we're able to see all of this data and information in real time. And we thought, how cool would it be if we brought this to a third-party platform where users are super engaged and where there's truly an unmet need? So if you think back to Foursquare a few years ago, there were specials, and what users would do is they would pick up their phone and show a code or a coupon or talk to the person behind the counter, and sometimes they knew what was going on, sometimes they didn't know. So we thought, how do we make this more seamless and more powerful together in a way that only our two companies can? And that's where we created something called Card Sync, where you were able to sync your American Express card with your Foursquare ID and profile. And by doing that, when you were checking in at a variety of different merchants, you would see an Amex exclusive special, and you would tap your finger on the phone, hit load to card, and it would load that offer to your card seamlessly. So all you had to do then is at the counter swipe your card or as you normally would, and you got a statement credit, a push notification that said your statement credits is on the way. That was a magical moment because what it really did, first of all, we have a massive company like Amex, a small company like Foursquare. We announced this at South by Southwest. People were like, we can't believe we're talking about American Express at South by Southwest. It just was such a powerful moment where we made something very seamless that before hadn't been. So it really changed the way we thought about partnerships, the way we thought about tech integrations. We moved extremely quickly together, and the relationship and the partnership really grew from there.
Yeah, I would say, the thing, again, for a small company like Foursquare, and today we're 160 people, you kind of have to figure out where you're going to prioritize your resources, your time, your effort. And I think for us, it's an easy decision to be made when you had, Leslie and her team really as engaged and wanting to roll up their sleeves with us and work with us. And so that enabled us to move engineering resources, which is really, again, in a startup is the most scarce resources that you have, and figuring out how to prioritize time to focus on this and really build product together that, by just kind of true collaboration. And I think that was kind of the big learnings, and that's really been the, what's evolved over the last, 2.5 plus years.
Yeah, and I remember back to the time, actually, we brought Dennis Crowley in to meet our CEO, Ken Chenault. And this was another aha moment. We were all talking about the philosophies of our companies, the philosophies of our business. We're an 160-year-old plus company. Foursquare was a baby at the time. And what was so fascinating is that the philosophy was the same, the approach was the same, the obsession about customers and merchants and merchant value and connecting, for us card members, but users and merchants together and creating value and service. It was just really incredible to see. And again, it just changed the mindset for us internally.
So I think a good question that a lot of folks in this audience probably would love to know as I go back and leave this beautiful place here in Palo Alto is, how did you work in this, in a very challenging category in financial services where there's a lot of legality? How are you able to impact and really make the change and create a culture that is so innovative there?
Yeah.
What's the secret sauce?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a multifaceted answer. Some of this is going to sound a little Pollyanna, but it's true. American Express is a very large company, and we're an older company. But everyone's very interconnected internally. So there is a very special culture. I think everyone's a little bit like 6 removed from Amex. I think everyone in this room probably knows somebody who works at American Express, and they probably love working at American Express and maybe has been there for like 20 years or so. It's a very interconnected, collaborative, hearts in the right place, passionate, entrepreneurial type of company. But we transformed. So where we were a few years ago when we were first entering the social media space was, the Wild West. And we were going through and struggling with what so many large companies, some of them still are struggling with, of who owns it, who controls it, where does it live, what's the reporting structure, et cetera. For me, what's most important, especially in the early days of selling in anything with an organization, is I like to undersell and over-deliver. I like to, in the beginning, spend as little money as I possibly can and exceed expectations. I think managing expectations, for anybody who works in digital or social media, knows this is an art and a science. This is not a straight up science. And I think that what we have to do is tailor our messages to the internal audiences where we're presenting or we're pitching concepts, make sure that they know, this is what we can expect and this is what we know the returns will be, and this is what we have no idea, but it's going to be powerful and we're going to learn a lot. So I think collaboration, culture, the loss of hierarchies and bureaucracies within organizations has been critical because, as I'm sure you know from Foursquare, you guys don't care about the most senior person at American Express at all. You care about the person who understands your platform, who uses it obsessively, and that person may be 24 and the entry-level person on my team. But that is the person I will put in front of the digital partner every single time. They do not care about the president. Well, they care a little about the president of the company, but not in this way, not when we're trying to do business development, product development, and really strategize together. So I think there's a lot of cultural change and evolution. There's definitely organizational, I think, is a big one. A leadership who believes in taking risks and trying new things and seeing what happens is critical. And then I think the last thing I would say is we very much let, and I think this was talked about throughout the morning, we let our users define our strategy. So what we didn't do was go out with massive fanfare and say, okay, this is what our Twitter presence is going to be, and this is what Foursquare is all about for us. What we would do is we started these presences, we started these environments, and we just listened obsessively. We didn't outsource the listening, we didn't outsource the tracking. We stayed very much on top of it and followed where our users were going.
I think your point too about finding the champion, and especially as we try and evolve digital and move to the next level is critical. I think that's something I've always found really important. Is at companies there's always that one person who's willing to kind of go the extra mile, stick their neck out, but is also passionate about your product. And I think that's a great I think point, which is when you find that, then you really have someone who's working. You really start working together, but someone's also working for you, and pushing and pulling each other.
Totally.
And I think that's another I think a really great point on that front.
Yeah, I think it's all about authenticity. You can't be a company with values and core assets offline and then try to be something totally different online or in digital. It has to be just a new manifestation, a new voice that comes to life. But interested in hearing from you sort of how Foursquare has obviously grown tremendously over time, sort of how the dynamics and culture has changed and how you work with big companies like ours. What are sort of the highlights and the lowlights?
Well, it's funny. So I was talking to someone from a CPG company the other day, this past week, and she goes, I remember when you had someone come into our meeting with the CEO and CMO in shorts and a t-shirt, and it was like horrifying. Right. And so I think over the last really year and a half when I was brought in, it was to really build the capabilities, the products, the skill set, the people to speak to marketers. I knew how to speak the language, understood how agencies worked. And so I think one thing that, I think a lot of tech companies, especially in the Valley, and I'm sure it's happening now with the Snapchat folks and certainly happened with Pinterest, is early on there's so much buzz and a lot of people want to do business with these companies or talk to these companies, but the truth is they just don't have the resources and they're just not ready to talk, right? And I think, but you naturally get kind of forced in these positions where at sometimes you do because people are relentless in wanting to talk to you. And I think sometimes it's just better off to say, you know what, I'll call you when I have something of value to deliver to you. Yeah. And I think that was something we did early on when I came in about a year and a half ago, was we just weren't there on a lot of product, certainly new products for different categories. And so over the last year and a half, and I think this earned us a lot of credibility, was to then go to customers and talk to the marketers and talk to agencies when we actually had something of value to add to and bring to them. And so I think that's one thing that's really helped us. And again, I think culturally, again, you start out, even though we're a New York-based company, we definitely have, the Valley DNA, and we got, it's heavy engineering. Two-thirds of the companies are two-thirds of the company's engineers, and we had to just like you do at a big company, we had to get engineers and get the company and the culture to embrace the fact that it's okay to introduce marketers and advertisers and integrate it into the system, into our service. And if you do it right, and again, I think it's the under promise, over deliver. Yeah. If you realize after a little bit, oh no, we didn't screw up the service by introducing a marketer into that experience, then they start embracing you. And that's really been the big cultural shift, and I think what a lot of tech companies go through, from building a platform, having a lot of users, but then the scary, oh my God, how do we monetize, and what's the business model around that? That then becomes, it's really important to get everyone culturally on the same page.
And you mentioned agencies, and I know there's a lot of agency representation in the room. How do you guys work with agencies versus the lead contacts of the brands, and vice versa? Yeah,
I mean, I think we spent a huge amount of time with agencies, and it's funny because, again, I think, and I'm sure a lot of you in the room feel this way too, social, mobile, it's a jump ball in a lot of cases. So we spend a lot of time with the creative shops, we spend a lot of time with the media buying agencies, we spend a lot of time with the social agencies, and again, being still at relatively small, it's hard to figure out how we prioritize our time and where we spend time. But we spend a lot of time collaborating. I think the best success we have, though, is working with folks like you guys, and then then a Digitas gets involved, right? And they get involved, and it really helps accelerate kind of the conversations that we have. So again, I think when we do beyond media, straight ad buys, and we're working in a lot of cases with platforms. Starwood's another example. I think there's someone from Starwood in the room here. There you go. This isn't. These aren't media buys. These are marketing programs. These are strategies that go well beyond media, and so it does take a lot of collaboration in those cases. Yeah. So I'm going to throw it back to you. How do you then prove? So you get partnerships off the ground. How do you then, how do you measure? How do you look at results? How do you, again, justify there are companies like Foursquare that aren't as big as Facebook and Twitter, and how do you again continue to sell that into your organization?
Great question. So my team is focused on what we call commerce innovation. So we have a very strong filter for the things that we do. We're a relatively new team and organization. I report into the president of American Express, but we are charged with bringing new, basically never been done before type of technology and experiences to our card members and our merchants. So that's a filter that we always use, because there's a ton of digital innovation happening across American Express, but that's how we sort of prioritize. We obviously are focused on, again, because every day is a sell-in. Depending on where you are across the company, to me, it's sort of, what is my message? How, am I repeating it appropriately? What is the next step? But for us, I always think about, where can we get the most scale? Because it's going to be limited, right? Everything that we do, I always assume, is going to start relatively small scale, because what we're bringing to market has never been done before, and it's digital, and it's a new experience, and we have to train new behavior. So I try not to spend a ton of my team's focus on things that are sort of like in the minutia. So we're very rigorous. It's almost a daily exercise of, what boils to the top, what bubbles to the top, what is going to move the needle, what is really going to delight our merchant partners, what is going to bring sort of collaboration across the organization. And in terms of measures of success, it depends on every single program, every single launch. What I've really fought against is being put in a box within the organization to say, okay, here's the spreadsheet, put in your expected metrics and put in your X, Y, and Z, and this is the document that we use across the organization. I always make sure we have enough room for gray space. Again, to say very clearly, this doesn't fit into the Excel spreadsheet. This is totally new, and this is when we'll know more, and this is how we'll track the progress, and this is when we'll see indicators. But it's, I think, critical when you're leading innovation or digitally transformative things in a company like ours, to make sure you're not in a boxed or typical process or way. Does anybody have any questions from the audience? No one. Somebody. Yes.
From your partnership, what was the big learning from the data that you received, not in terms of transactions?
Great question. So the question.
How did that partnership change over time? You said you were listening constantly.
Yeah. Are you talking about the Foursquare relationship specifically?
Yeah, specifically. And then how did you kind of change that and bring that to what you did in social and beyond?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a loaded question. So the question was, how did we look at and learn from what we, I think, tell me this is the question, what we did with Foursquare, how did that evolve over time, and then how did we leverage that across other platforms? So a few things. First of all, when we launched with Foursquare, what we did is we brought in merchant partners. So big brands, I don't remember at the time, but I think it was Whole Foods and McDonald's and some of the others. So we had sort of like a collaborative partnership that was happening with Foursquare. So we sort of brought Foursquare in and showed our merchant partners at the time, which was totally new experience, you know, how can you digitally market your offers and your value in a totally new way? So we already, you know, from that alone, we changed the conversations with our merchant partners, and we're always trying to be, you know, add new value to merchants and deepen that relationship. So that was critically important. Then, of course, we looked at engagement. So, you know, Foursquare was the perfect partner when you're talking about offers, local offers. You are getting people in the magic moment, right? They have checked in on a location, they love that merchant, and you are delighting them with a completely seamless value add of $5 back, $10 back, $20 back, whatever, that you can also share with your friends. So the results and the trends of not just the load, what we call loading the offer to your card, but the redemptions was extremely high on Foursquare specifically. Foursquare, to me, very much has the niche in this market, right? It is the most engaged local platform if you're trying to do something like this. So what was interesting when we pivoted to other not pivoted, sorry, we still love Foursquare, and that relationship has evolved over time as the platform has gotten much smarter. But as we expanded and looked at Facebook and Twitter, and we do more on those platforms and with Foursquare than just offers, but what we wanted to do was stay very authentic to those platforms. So we said, okay, let's think about Facebook, let's think about that social graph and your likes and the things that you're passionate about. We can now serve you up an offer or an experience that's tied to the things you like. And how do we make that shareable in a different way that can only happen on Facebook? Same thing with Twitter. We added a completely different sort of approach and dimension to that, just given the tweet and how you express that in 140 characters and how viral that can be and how many new followers our merchant partners got. So we always look at it at the card member side and then also the merchant side, the merchant value side. So not just spend, but did they go back again? So they redeemed the offer, did they go back again? Did they spend more the next time? And from the merchant partners, did you grow followers through this program? How many people talked about the program? How many people walked into your establishment for the first time? Things like that.
Yeah, I think to that, you know, data, we looked a lot at data, understanding how, you know, helping Amex really understand how, you know, which users were syncing their cards and what were those users doing versus other users, and, you know, a lot of kind of looking at the insights, what type of merchants were they going to, were they most likely to unlock an offer. So there was a lot of information that we were sharing back and forth.
I'm sorry, yes.
I remember being at South by.
Yes. You don't remember?
Maybe I never got the discount.
No,
Yeah.
I'll tell you. So he just admitted and confessed that he never synced his card at South by Southwest.
Missed out.
What was interesting is, and this is sort of the understory, is that we moved a lot more quickly than we thought we would. We built this pretty damn fast. So we ended up nearing to South by Southwest, and we're like, wait a minute, we can actually announce this at South by Southwest. We did it really scrappy. I mean, we were like walking around with iPads, being like, think your card. You know, we put out a press release, but we moved much more quickly than we ever thought we could. The next year, we did Twitter Sync. Jay-Z, we brought South by, I'm sure you heard and read. Oh, you were there. There you go. So we all upgraded, I guess, the next year. But it was, yeah, we were new, and we were a different company a couple years ago.
It's cool to see companies experiment.
Thank you.
Rather than like try to go balls to the wall with
Yeah.
one particular program, and it makes the bar so high.
Thank you for saying it. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Steve, you got really innovative product, and you were first to market in this space. There are now tons of different ways to check in. I'm so loud, you really don't need this. You got tons of ways to check in. There are other competitors out there. What kinds of partnerships like this, what kinds of things are you doing with other platforms to create that ecosystem around Foursquare that keeps your consumers engaged and keeps your merchants engaged?
Yeah, I mean, there was one thing that you may have read this morning, that Pinterest is now using Foursquare data to drive kind of snapping location to a pin, and so we're again, I think the beyond the check-in is now this just huge, massive data footprint that we have, where you give us a lat longitude and we can tell you what's going on at any given time. And so I think it's a lot more than that. And the way we work with lots of different marketers in lots of different categories is just again trying to understand what's the common thing that we have between each other. For American Express and Foursquare, it was we both were very passionate about helping small businesses, right? We're both passionate about helping reinvent the shopping experience. So I think once you find those kind of shared synergies with different companies, then you can really start to leverage that and take advantage of that. In the spirits category, for example, they have no control over the consumer who's at a bar. So how do you work with those companies? How do you work with a Diageo? How do you work with an Anheuser-Busch and reinvent that experience? And so there's so much that can be done. We're not even in the first inning, I think, of where this world is going. We're just scratching the surface, and there's so much innovation to be had in the future. I guess I know we're down to time. I'll ask maybe the last question is, Leslie, next, it's been a fascinating ride over the last couple of years for you, really reinventing, Amex and as this, super innovative company. Where do you see the next, 12 to 24 months? What are the things that are interesting for you that you're looking at?
I don't think beyond tomorrow, my friend.
That's true.
I'm going to take it down to 12 months. We are still maniacally focused on commerce, making commerce easier, more seamless, more intuitive, guiding purchasing behavior, engaging card members in a way that is at their fingertips. I know that we're all thinking about this in all of our jobs, but you'll see a lot more innovation from us. We just launched the ability to use your membership rewards points in New York City taxi cabs. I don't know how many people saw that, but swipe your card, shows you how many points it costs, load it right there to your card. That to us was pretty groundbreaking because you didn't need to wave a phone or punch in a code or do anything differently at all. That's where we want to be. How do we be disruptive with making the customer experience totally slick and intuitive? Back at you.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really interesting and kind of plays to the last question is I think the concept of passive geo now, and not necessarily explicitly having to take out your phone and check in. It's just having now the data, having phones that are smart enough, having the software and the chips that are good enough to be able to now kind of create magical experiences, if you will, when you're out and about and all of a sudden you see an offer, you see certain content that makes that everyday experience a little bit more exciting. And that's what we're focused on. Then you can kind of expand that to wearables and in car, and there's so many different things that have, as long as there's a screen and an API, there's so many wonderful things that can happen, and that's what we're looking at.
Cool. Thank you.
Cool.